Production funding for this program is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to another A Conversation With. I'm Tom Prestigiacomo, your host, and our conversation is today with Lyman Aldrich. Lyman, thank you for being here.
A pleasure being here, Tom.
We all know where the buck stops, but sometimes we don't know where the buck starts. And when we talk about the Memphis in May Bucks, actually the whole downtown Bucks, you're Chairman Emeritus. What's your official title?
Founder, Chairman Emeritus of Memphis in May.
You founded Memphis in May.
I did.
All
Somebody had to do it, and it was kind of my turn.
All right. Well, I want to come to that, but I want to start you off so that people can get a chance to know who you are. You grew up in Mississippi.
Natchez, Mississippi.
How big a town?
300 years old this year on the banks of the Mississippi.
How many people?
19,000 people today, so it was much smaller than that back in the 50s and the 60s.
Do you get back there very much?
At least once a year, going back there in 2 weeks.
All right. Well, all right. If I'm going to Natchez, Mississippi, are there 3 restaurants I need to go breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Who would I go for?
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. At breakfast, I would stay at wherever I'm having bed and breakfast, whether it's Dunleith or one of the other big homes, the Briars. I would go to lunch down on the riverfront, one of the cafes, maybe the Cock of the Walk. Right. And for dinner, I'd go to the Castle. Have grits and griots.
I've never had it, but I look forward to that.
It's behind Dunleith, the biggest, most beautiful home in Natchez.
Antebellum Homes.
Yes.
There. All right, so you graduate from high school in Natchez and you go to?
I go to Ole Miss.
University of Mississippi.
Right.
What years were you there?
I was there from 61 to 67 with some time off for good behavior.
They're called sabbaticals.
Yeah, I went back home and worked for a year to try to earn enough money to go back.
All right, well, let's not leave college yet because I want to talk about this. Those were some years. 1962, 63, those were tough years to be at Ole Miss.
62 was the worst because that's when all the riots happened.
Set the scene for that. Tell me a little bit about.
Well, as you know, the whole national news story for a year or so was integration of the schools.
Right.
And it was Ole Miss's turn, right. and Barnett and President Kennedy had gotten their I think heads together on how they were going to do this. Right. And so it was back and forth. As we went to school in September, seems like all of the media was there, backing and forth and trying to create problems out of what was happening, which was already a tinderbox.
And you were 19 years old then, right?
I was 19 years old then.
So that's quite a perspective.
It was a perspective. The way they did it is that there was a football game in Jackson, Mississippi. I think it was against Kentucky. Okay. So they got everybody off campus to go down to that game, and there's some incredible footage about Ross Barnett and the speech that he made. Mm-hmm. And is something that if anybody's interested in history, they ought to see that. So we get back to Ole Miss the next day. We drive on campus, mm-hmm. and we drive up to the Lyceum, the administration building, and it was surrounded by Secret Service, 500 Secret Service with tear gas. Right. And nobody had known anything about that. They did it while we were all down in Jackson, Mississippi. So you really kind of, young people they don't take a liking to something like this, somebody right. taking over the university. And I happened to be standing in front of the Lyceum, and this was about 5 o'clock, maybe it was 6, and somebody behind me threw a bottle.
Oh no!
And then the guns came off, the tear gas, and they started shooting, and I just ran like crazy over to the fraternity house. Man, I didn't get close to that place.
That had to have an impact on you for the rest of your life.
It did, for all of us, and it was a terrible thing for Ole Miss because it could have been avoided. It could have been done a different way, in my opinion.
Was it coincidence that the football team was so good? I mean, didn't you run the table in '62?
Absolutely did. It was 10-0 in the national championship right. that year, and it was coincidental.
I mean, can you imagine
No, none of us could, and that all this was happening on so negative on one side and so positive on the other.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about the news teams. You were talking about some of the complications where these guys would do anything to get footage. Do you think they were intentionally divisive, or they were just trying to tell a story the way they wanted to tell it?
Going into it, they were telling the story, but after that night of riots and so forth, and it was, several of us didn't go back down to the next afternoon after the shooting had stopped,
Right.
and the smoke was still in the air, and somebody from ABC saw 4 of us hanging around and said, "Turn over that Volkswagen, I need more action film." That's when I knew I had a problem with, okay, does press always do this?
Yeah, well, I guess that would make you suspect. All right, so you graduated with what kind of degree?
Marketing degree.
And you stayed in Ole Miss, or you came?
No, thank goodness somebody offered me a job. And
Okay.
it was Scott Paper Company, and said, "We have a station wagon waiting for you in Memphis, and we want you to sell toilet paper."
And
Scott toilet paper.
And you sold it out of your car?
I did. Well, not on the side of the road.
Right.
I had to go into the to Kroger and Cecil's and all the other places and sell them the products of Scott Paper Company.
How long did that last?
I lasted 3 months, and I said, "Oh my gosh, my marketing degree, I want to do something different." And so, thank goodness, my application to First National Bank was accepted for the training program.
Good. And how long? were you
9
at-
years, and
Okay.
they were vice president in 1976.
So how far? Where does that take us? I mean, you did so many other things. You were part of after Martin Luther King was shot in 1968. You got to Memphis in 1970.
I got here in 67.
You got here in 67 before that. So tell me about Memphis in 1968 then.
In 1968, going up to that, you think it's just a town where you're trying to make a living, and then all of a sudden this tragic thing happens to Dr. King, and everything turned around overnight, and the city was marked forever as a backwater river town by Time magazine.
And that was their actual quote.
That
wasn't
was
it?
their actual quote. And so at that split second, Memphis changed totally.
And that's in participation and integration in any opportunities to work together.
Totally changed.
I remember the story they tell at Stax Records, or when you go through for the tour, there's that conversation, and Duck Dunn says pretty much that's it, that nobody trusted anybody anymore, and we became 2 separate cities.
And yes, and you can see why that would happen. Thank goodness there was a Stax there to continue to work together and do some things. Right. I was in business development at the bank, and I pitched my bosses on, let's go raise some money from the music industry, right, and let's bring customers in. And this was in 69.
Now,
69.
Now you're talking record labels, or because we had studios? There was Sam Phillips.
The only label you had was Stax here, really, and then so you had Sam Phillips, and you had Willie Mitchell at Royal Studios, and then and of course Stax was the big one on the block, and there were Ardent Studios, and then there were several small studios. Jim Eichner was part of a studio with Jerry Williams and with Steve Cropper.
I remember that.
And I remember calling on them, and so I went to first. My idea was I'm going to go to see Sam Phillips, and I went to see Mr. Sam, and Jerry and Knox were there, and I said, Nashville's kicking our rear end as music. In 1964, they put together the Country Music Association, and we're not doing anything to promote Memphis music. I said, would you come together with all the other labels if I get everybody to say yes? We're going to do it at the bank. Right. Can you imagine all the long hairs and what they look like, except for Jim, of course.
I was a long hair back then.
Yeah, I know. But going into the bank at that point in time. Right. So we had them all come into the bank, and I pitched them on doing this thing in competition with Nashville, and so they all voted to do this, and they had this young bank guy who was the temporary chairman of this august group of music guys that I saw sitting out there. That didn't last long. We had to get a music guy in there. Right. And that was Marty Lacker that came in from Chips Moman studio to put it together. We had a run of about 5 years of incredible music. American was one of the great studios. Right. And Stax was just putting them out, and Isaac Hayes was incredible, and everything. And Al Green was just getting started. I mean, there was some incredible things happening. We had Grammy quality award shows down at the Rivermont. I mean, they were just. I wish we had films of them. I don't know if any of them exist, But it only lasted until the recession really took place in 74 and 75, and Stax went out of business at that time, and the whole music scene basically went out of business on life support. Memphis was in a terrible recession. Chamber was all but broke, and I was on that board of directors at the time.
The Chamber of Commerce was almost broke?
We were all but declaring bankruptcy, and wouldn't that have been something for...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was because of the drain from downtown, where people
Well,
just...
First of all, it was from the assassination of Dr. King.
Right.
And then developers out east started coming down and just sucking people out and going out to the eastern portions of our city.
East Memphis.
All right, and doing that. And then people were afraid to come downtown. Things were closing up. Businesses just kept moving it out and moving out. And so the dues to the chambers went down, and they were in a big office building downtown, the old Boyle building at 2nd and Monroe,
Okay.
and they couldn't pay the rent. And it was a big fight about whether or not they were going to get tossed out, or they just finally made a deal with the landlord and were able to move to an office building downtown.
So if you couldn't keep the chamber down there, how could you keep businesses down there?
That's exactly right. How could you do that? And so it was a real struggle. Nobody was doing anything. They were just trying to save the Chamber of Commerce at that point in time.
And yet this is the time that your personal career went into building development, right? I mean, Jack Tucker was downtown, and
Tucker was this great architect,
He was
and he
amazing.
he did downtown and historic. He was a great guy to follow and provided lots of leadership.
He was a
in that.
visionary.
And definitely was.
But you built on that dream too. He built a condo complex. That's right there near the
Timpani.
Right.
He and Norman Brewer, Carol Coletta, Charlie Virgos,
Right.
and George and Connie, and they took this building, and I think they developed 6 condominiums in it on 68 Union, I believe.
Right there next to the Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Right there. That's exactly right.
And then
did a wonderful job in that place. And then I had left the bank by that time, and my investors, I said, I'd like to do condominiums in a downtown building, and I'll buy the first one. And they said, okay. And that was pretty darn good for somebody to have that kind of confidence, because the Peabody was closed, the Orpheum was running not XXX, but they were
on their last legs.
They were on the last legs. House of 1,000 Pleasures, I think I've got a picture of one of the things. So Beale Street was closed.
With chain link.
And Peabody.
It was chain link.
Chain linked. And Schwab was the only thing that was open.
And so you bought a building that put 20, did you say 20 condominiums?
On Front Street, Old
In what
Sledge
year?
Norfleet building. Bought it in 78, and I moved in barbecue 1979.
All right, now I'm saving barbecue for a little bit later down
That's
the story.
the weekend I moved in.
All right, well, that's what I want to ask you. It's 1978, and I'm looking for a condominium downtown, and I find your real estate agent and say, what can I get?
Well, you could have gotten an 800 square foot apartment for $22,000
To own as a condo.
To own, and mine was the most expensive. It was $2,000 at $70,000, 2,000 square feet.
What do you think you could get for that today?
I mean, yeah, golly, it's really gone up. I wish I'd have kept some of those.
But that was the start of I don't want to call it infill, but the rebirth of downtown was
people wanting to come back.
People wanting to come back, and then businesses would follow. We hope, and it looked like, with AutoZone's complex down there,
But nothing was there, and you figure out when I started doing this, there was literally nobody downtown except for what Jack had done down there on Union, and then the next year Henry did the Shrine Building.
Henry Turley.
In 1980.
And from there, that's where the personal housing goes. But let's talk about bringing people back downtown, because they wouldn't come to even shop. I mean, didn't Goldsmiths close down there at that time?
Goldsmiths was still open.
Okay.
It was still open when I was living down there on Front
Who
Street.
left? Let's talk with that.
Now, Lowenstein was down there for a while, but they weren't doing very well, and they kept inching out of there. I don't know what years those people left, but there were no restaurants downtown, and of course we said there's no Orpheum, no Peabody, no Beale Street at that point in time, and so I had been asked by a group at the Chamber called the Memphis MA International Festival Society back in '74.
And that was separate from like Cotton Carnival, right? Cotton Carnival was the big thing
part,
forever.
but it was a part of all. A guy came back from Alfred Alburn came back from the Edinburgh Festival in Scotland in '68, and told the chamber, look, they do something for an entire month of August, and they put on hundreds and hundreds of events. And we ought to do that in Memphis because you've got Carnival, the Shower of Stars, the opera trials, you've got all those, and the golf tournament, everything was happening. Why don't you do something, Chamber of Commerce? Well, that was '68. The only thing they did in 1973 was open the Cook Convention Center under the moniker of the Memphis May International Festival Society.
Okay.
And in '74, they had asked me as a member of Carnival. I was one of the members of the Memphis May Festival Society.
Which crew were you in?
Osiris.
Okay.
And they asked me to be a part, and I said, okay, I'll be one of the 5 people from Carnival on the society. Well, then in '74, the board had asked me to plan to be president in '77, one of those stair-step things.
Okay.
So that was right in the middle of the recession, right after King had been assassinated, and the chamber having its problem, and it's just one problem after another problem. And I said, well, thank you. There's no money, and now it's my turn.
And now go make it fun.
And the guy at the chamber said, look, we hadn't done anything in 3 years with it. It's been dormant. If it's your time, but look, nobody's going to blame you, and if you can shut it down, nobody's going to care.
So Memphis in May could have been done before it ever started.
Yes.
How did you turn it around?
I said, let me think about what I want to do with this. And nobody was creating jobs. And I knew anything they would do, you had to be something about economic development. But I didn't know how I wanted to do it. I liked the name International, but I didn't like the name Society.
Okay.
So I went to Rhodes, it was Southwest College in Memphis, and talked to their international people. I went to Memphis State University and talked to their international people and made the decision that we were going to honor one country so we could focus on that country with the hope, if they liked us, maybe they would come and if they were going to invest in the United States, maybe they would invest in Memphis with their friends. So I picked Japan, Canada, and Germany because they were our 3 biggest partners, and Japan had such a balanced trade problem, so they were going to have to invest here.
So that was the first 3 years.
Those were the first 3 years, and it was all those were picked for economic development reasons.
Okay. And did you go to Japan?
I did not. I'm the only president that has not been to their country because there was absolutely no money. Chamber had no money. The city had no money. So how are we going to do this?
What was your budget?
Budget was zero to begin with, but it worked up. We put the whole thing on for $52,000. No, we paid. It was $62,000. We only had it budgeted for $52,000, so Tiff Bingham went to the bank, borrowed $10,000 so we could go on. We had such momentum going on.
Right. All right. So who actually gave you the underwriting to start the thing off? I mean, were there individuals? Was it corporations?
It was a combination.
Okay.
It was a combination. I went to Jack Morris. The chamber said, go to Jack Morris. Jack Morris Auto Glass.
Right.
And he's such a great citizen of the city, and he and a bunch had been in charge of the bicentennial the year before, in 1976.
In Libertyland's birth and everything.
Yeah, but this was bicentennial celebration.
Right.
I actually had somebody said they had money left over. So I went and pitched my idea to Jack and said, you're going to do international. We hope to get some business with international. Then we're going to do a lot of Memphis character events. So we get people out of their houses in Memphis to come downtown again if we do all these events downtown.
Okay.
And so he said, well, Lyman, let me think about it and talk to some board members, and I'll call you back. So I get a call the next day. He said, you got $30,000. That's all we have left.
Oh gosh.
I said, oh my gosh, my budget's 52. So we're almost there. Then we went to First Tennessee. FedEx back then gave us $4,000. We did an event every day during the business day in Court Square about Japan.
Did I read a story about Abe Plow participating?
You did. The last event of the year of May was the symphony.
Right.
And we were down there setting up because we didn't have any money, we didn't have any staff, and so we all worked every event. And he came down, and Tiff was his friend, and Gene Arthur, and said, come over to my car, and gave him a check for $5,000 saying, I really like what you guys have done for Memphis.
We're down about
really
to about
nice.
our last 6 minutes. I want to make sure I get everything in. You talked about how it was so easy to become a chairman of Memphis in May, or in charge of one particular thing. Like, who came up with the idea for the poster, the annual poster that's been?
Carla Hubbard Meisterman. She came to us and said, look, I can't afford art. I need cheap art. And what if we take the honored country every year and we get one of the great Memphis artists to do a depiction of that country, and then we'll sell posters. We looked at each other and said, that's a great idea. And so we said, you're chairman.
Who else?
Go
were your
raise the money and we'll help you.
Who were your chairmen for the other things?
Dr. Moshe Von Hooks came up with the whole idea of the education program in the school systems.
How did you get Black Memphis and White Memphis to work together at that time?
That's the story.
I
went to Harold Shaw. He was with Universal Life Insurance Company and the husband of Pat Shaw, Maceo Walker's daughter. I went to lunch with him and I said, Harold, I'd known him from trying to put together an NFL football team, and I said, Harold, here's my idea. I said, but it's not going to work unless if it's all white boys over here, it's just not going to work. I said, it's got to be 50-50. I said, will you bring your friends to be a part of something to try to turn the city around, to create jobs and make it a better city for our families? And he looked at me across the table and said, Lyman, are y'all going to listen?
Yeah.
In other words, are you white boys going to listen?
Right.
I said, Harold.
Do you really care what we
yeah,
say?
Right. I said,
And
because
you
nobody
did.
else had. Nobody had ever invited him to the Chamber of Commerce, ever. We were the first ones. We had a meeting in the basement of the Chamber of Commerce. And Harold, he said, I want to bring George Brown. And I didn't know who George was. I said, bring George. I mean, then bring Moshe Von Hook. I didn't know any of those people.
What did George do?
He was a lawyer, and I was on the school board at the time. And then I had Rodney Baber and Tiff Bingham and Gene Arthur and Tom Hutton and Richard Bethea, and they all knew they were going to have to deal with the other race, and was just going to be sitting around the table to try to create something that was going to save the city.
And look what it's done. I mean,
what it's done.
But I want to stay close. Whose idea was the music, the concept of it?
Well, that was an events committee that Baber chaired my events committee.
Okay.
And his team came up. We got to do a Beale Street Music Festival.
Right.
So they went shoulder to shoulder with Irvin Salke. Irvin had the money and he wanted to do it. And so Beale Street was closed. But the groups, Irvin and us, put together a 2-day music festival with B.B. King taking the stage at midnight with 6,500 people. Now, this was the first time anybody had gotten together
midnight
in mass.
in Memphis.
On Saturday night.
On Saturday night.
Right, 6,500 people,
And
men and
B.B.
women.
King playing.
Right, first time since Dr. King had been assassinated. And King took the stage. Al Green was there the next day. I mean, and Rufus Thomas. I mean, it was just one
It
of
was
those
Memphis
incredible.
music.
It was incredible what happened that night.
Oh,
and that proved people can stay together, work together, enjoy each other, and not have any problems.
Memphis in May means so many different things to so many different people. For my daughter, for the first few years, it was the Beale Street Music Festival. Now she's part of a barbecue team. That's what I want to ask. Whose idea was it to cook barbecue at the first contest in, 1978?
So
right?
Events Committee Chairman Baber calls me after the markets at Morgan Keegan closed, and he said, I got an idea. Jack Powell's been cooking chili down in Texas. He said, what do you think if we do a barbecue cooking contest? I said, oh my God, Rodney, what a great idea. And that was in 77, and we had our first one in 78.
Right. And you were literally you were in the Orpheum parking lot.
Orpheum parking lot, right.
That's
18 teams. And Bessie, Louise, Kathy won it.
Were there any businesses that were involved in this, or were they just
Not that I know
patio
of.
pork? I mean,
It
there's
was all
people with Weber
patios.
grills or
Right.
less, you said. And
A lot less.
And that's where they did it. And then you had a couple of years where you moved to Tom Lee Park.
The next year.
So
it wouldn't rain on us, but we put 42 cookers under one tent.
like a big top tent.
Yeah, it was really bright. It was really smart.
You didn't get wet, but you
No, I
couldn't
didn't get
talk
wet.
for
That's
3
right.
days
That's
afterwards.
Exactly, and we did it the next year too. I don't know why the committee did it, but we let them do it.
That was my first year to be involved. Was the second year you guys had the tent, and look how it's grown. Are you amazed? Are you surprised? I know you're happy.
I'm really surprised and happy with barbecue, and it's taken on. It's the mother of all barbecue cooking
sure is.
contests. It has started the entire industry in the whole country.
sure did.
All the shows you see, all the things that you see, and yeah, I'm really happy about what that team did. I mean, the team that were our volunteers that put that together.
Right.
Was it wasn't Rodney didn't take any active role in that, but Denise Bolheimer and Bill Carpenter and Mike Pleasance, those were early people that brought that team together to build what you see today.
There's so many great chairmen that you've had along the way.
Oh, incredible people that just give hours and hours and hours of volunteer time.
We're down to our last minute. What would you do different with Memphis in May, or what would you do better? Do you miss the Sunset Symphony?
Oh, I'll always miss the Sunset Symphony. My gosh. I wish it would come back in some kind of form at some point in time. I wish we did more in deciding what country we're going to pick based on how we can create economic development, because that's what the city needs. Okay. We need to go to those countries that really can invest in our city.
I got you. And I hope that they come back to do that. Our guest today has been Lyman Aldrich. Lyman, thank you very much.
Quite welcome, Tom.
We hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Lyman Aldrich, and we'll see you next time here on WKNO.
Production funding for this program is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.